Hey y'all, I'm Stephanie and I'm all about that Bible life. This year I completed my master's degree in biblical counseling, and man, was it a lot of work. One of the things that I had to finish in order to complete this degree was a thesis project, which was basically a very huge research paper where you pick a specific problem and attack it from a lot of different directions, find a biblical approach, and practical solutions. The problem that I decided to address was the problem of the rising rate of suicide in young adults and how the church can be part of the solution. I cannot wait to share more about what I discovered in that. But one of the things that stood out to me during my research was the very vast and prevalent problem of depression. You see, suicide is the second leading cause of death in people ages 10 to 34, which is astounding because that's the time of life where people should be the most excited, the most energetic, the most hopeful. Their careers are rising, they're accomplishing things like graduating and starting new things, new relationships, and the world is before them. Their future is right in front of them, and there's so much to come. But so many people in that age range, as well as the other age ranges, deal with the problem of depression. Depression is the leading cause for the suicide and suicidal tendencies. And so I started digging into depression and what does the Bible have to say about depression? What can we learn about what causes depression? And I have to tell you, what I found from my research into depression was that depression in each individual comes from a variety of different ways, a variety of different angles. It's not a superficial, one dimensional type of a problem. And therefore, the solutions cannot be simple, one dimensional type solutions. We are complex beings. Depression is a complex problem. And therefore, our discussion of it should come from a more varied approach instead of just a simple one size fits all solution. You see, in the past, whenever the church has tried to address the topic of depression, it has come at it from a purely spiritual standpoint, where when someone is feeling depressed, the answer we have typically given has been one dimensional. Well, you need to pray about that. You need to get right with God. You need to have more faith. You need to be more spiritual. And people have tried that and still found themselves struggling with depression. But now let's take what the world does. In the world today, whenever you walk into a doctor's office and the nurse is asking you all these questions about your symptoms and your problems and the things that they ask you about before you see the doctor themselves, they ask you now, do you feel depressed? And if you answer yes, they mark it down. And 90% of the time, they say, oh, you're feeling depressed. Let me write you a prescription for that. And they give you a pill, and you take that. And that is supposed to be the one dimensional solution to all of the problems. However, many people take depression medicine and still feel depressed. Many people take depression medicine and continue to have to up their dose of medicine because the prescription is not the only solution they need. You see, I would like to suggest that from a biblical perspective, human beings are triune. We have more than one dimension to us. We have the physical side, but we also have the spiritual side, and we have the mental and emotional side, where half of our brain is logical thoughts and half of our brain is emotions and responses to external stimuli. And so we've got this triune perspective that we need to have. The Bible gives this to us and reminds us that we are designed to reflect the image of God. And being triune beings means that the problems that we face have multiple answers and multiple perspectives. So, as we dive into the topic of depression, and by diving in, I mean we're going to jump in, we're going to hit it from several different perspectives, and then I'm going to give you some sources of more information so you can go and research it on your own. But to start with, I would like to remind you that the Bible talks about us as being multifaceted, triune people, humans created in the image of God. And therefore, when the Bible talks about depression, and it does, it talks a lot about depression. When the Bible talks about depression, it does not give a one size fits all solution. For example, King David went through a time in his life where he was greatly depressed. But as we read his story and we read his words, we discover that his depression came from sin in his life. He had committed adultery with Bathsheba. He had murdered her husband, married her, and they had had a child. And then the child was sick and he was depressed. So far depressed that his advisors were worried that he would harm himself. But God sent the prophet Nathan to confront him. And once David got right with God, his depression left. His child still died. He still suffered loss and grieved over that loss. But the heavy weight of depression was no longer weighing on him because he had dealt with the sin issue that was weighing him down. But then on the other hand, Elijah, the prophet, he was on the mountaintop fighting against the prophets of Baal, and he called down fire from heaven. God consumed his offering with a great ball of fire and dried up all the water around the altar and just totally won a victory, like a very public, amazing victory. Elijah is on top of the world. He is winning at spiritual life. And then Queen Jezebel threatens to kill him, and he takes off running. And he runs and he hides and he calls out to God and he says, God, I am sorry that I'm even alive. If this is how it's going to be, just kill me now. I don't even want to live anymore. I'm the only one left who's serving you. Everything is horrible. There's no hope. Just take my life. And instead of God confronting him with his sin, God sent an angel to minister to Elijah, who fed him a snack and told him to take a nap. Isn't that crazy? Like that's a totally different approach than how David needed to address his depression. Elijah needed a snack and a nap. Then after he had eaten the food and rested, he went on and God spoke to him and he corrected his wrong thinking. You're not the only one who is following me. I still have this many extra prophets left over who are still serving me and they haven't bowed the knee to the idols of Baal. And he corrected Elijah's thinking. And then God gave him a new purpose. And he said, Elijah, I'm not done with you yet. Come on out here, do these things and continue to serve me. You're not alone. I have a plan for you. So God addressed it more than just spiritual things. He addressed his wrong thinking. He addressed his physical exhaustion and handled his depression in a variety of different ways. Whenever Jonah went to the people of Nineveh after he'd been swallowed by the fish and after he'd been spit up on the shore and after he went and preached to the people of Nineveh repented and Jonah became depressed. Well, God caused a plant to grow up next to Jonah and create some shade so that Jonah would be protected and shielded, so that his physical body would not be beat down under the blazing hot sun. And so his physical needs were addressed, but Jonah still continued to gripe and complain and to be depressed and cried out that his soul was ready to die because he didn't like what God was doing in the situation. And that happens to us sometimes. We get a stubborn hold on what we think our life should look like, and we become angry at God, or we become discouraged or disappointed because things aren't turning out the way we want. And what God says to Jonah, basically, to summarize, is you don't know the whole picture. And the things that I have in store for these people, that's not your business. The things that I have in store for you can be good if you will just accept it. So, as we go into the next few videos, we're going to talk about depression from a biblical perspective, knowing that the Bible has a lot to say about our physical life, our mental and our emotional life, as well as our spiritual life. You see, I firmly believe that the Bible is not just a Sunday morning thing. It's not just something that I read in order to understand God or have faith, even though it is very good for that. The Bible gives us everything we need for life as well as godliness. And so, as we approach this topic of depression, we're going to approach it from a threefold perspective: physical, spiritual, and mental emotional. And we're going to start with the simple things, the most easy to address, the most obvious, the most surface level things. And we're going to gradually go in to the heart of the matter. And so, we're going to start with the things that it's possible for you to address as an individual, and then we'll move towards the heavier things that you might need some professional help with, and the heart of the matter, where if you're still continuing to deal with depression in these levels, these areas, then you need to talk to a counselor, you need to talk to your doctor or a therapist, and we'll get into the details on that. But the first thing I wanted you to recognize is that when we address depression from a biblical perspective, it's not a simple answer. It's not just get right with God, even though that will play into it. And it's not just take a pill, even though that could be part of the solution. It's also all three: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of our lives, because we're created to reflect the image of God. And God wants us to live a full life that is abundant with the fruit that comes from knowing Him. That fruit: love for one another, joy in spite of our circumstances, peace instead of worry, patience instead of frustration and restlessness. All of these things come at us whether we're experiencing depression or not. And so I hope that you will tune into the next few videos as we talk about depression from a biblical perspective.